Hello and welcome. It's Bev from Living Fabulously, and today I wanted to talk about how do you know if you or someone that you love is dealing with an invisible chronic illness. And I feel it's important to define these terms first so that we can understand what we're talking about. So the first part of that term is chronic. So the word chronic often means something that is long-term ongoing. And when we're talking about chronic illness, there are long-lasting symptoms. So it's not like just having a cold, which may pass and, then you feel better. These symptoms will persist. So in spite of treatment, there might still be symptoms that remain. The other thing is that the chronic illness creates impact over time. So if we think of things like, just take an example of something like Lyme disease. So you may have been bitten by the tick. There may be some immediate problems, but in fact, the problem develops over a longer time frame. And so it is with some other chronic illnesses. So that's the chronic part of it. The next part of it is the invisibility of it. So we all know what the word invisible means, but did you know that 96% of people show no outward signs of their illness? So this means that it's not obvious to you as an onlooker. And in a world that we live in where we're always looking for evidence, this can be really, really difficult because there's stigma attached to things like chronic fatigue syndrome, for example. People appear to look fine. People even say how well you look. There's also the fact that you don't look sick, but you are acting as if you are incapable. So I'll talk about this in a separate thing because there's a whole lot of things you wouldn't want to say to somebody who's got an invisible chronic illness. It's pretty disempowering when people don't believe you, and I've written about that in my book, Hope in a Dark Tunnel. But some examples, just so that you can support yourself with understanding and knowledge. So we have the diagnosed invisible chronic illnesses. So for example, rheumatoid arthritis is both invisible and chronic. Chronic fatigue syndrome, whilst there's no specific one test for it, there are a sort of agreed set of things that you have. The problem with these diagnoses is that when you don't fit the mold, that can be really difficult because we've been conditioned to understand that there's a label and therefore the label has a plan and usually a pharmaceutical. So what we're looking for here is to have broader understanding. So you may have heard of the term fibromyalgia. So for somebody with fibromyalgia, it's very debilitating, as are rheumatoid arthritis and chronic fatigue syndrome. And because people can't see this, they don't understand the level of pain and discomfort that somebody's in. And let's be honest, none of us will show up in the world as our sick self. We keep that behind closed doors, most of us. Then other things like Lyme disease, it is so difficult to actually detect because it's what I would call an intelligent stealth bacterial infection. And it changes form. So it actually has 4 different forms. And the only one that is detectable by the immune system is the spirochete form, which is very difficult to cure because it's a corkscrew and it burrows into the cells. So that can be really long term. Then there's things like multiple sclerosis, which people seem to know more about because it's a diagnosis that has been discussed many times before. Then more newer things like Hashimoto's, thyroiditis. So it's an autoimmune condition, and so is lupus an autoimmune condition. And what that really means is that the body doesn't understand the signals that it's being given by the environment that we're living in, and often it actually turns and starts attacking the body. So that's just a few of them. I mean, there are just so many. You may know somebody who lives with chronic pain post, a surgery or post an accident. There are just so many invisible chronic illnesses. So how do you know that you're dealing with something like that? There's often a common constellation of symptoms. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is, some of the things that you'll find common to many of these things. And the first one is pain at some level. So people often have joint pain, or they have muscular pain, or it could come in the form of terrible ice pick headaches. So with somebody dealing with Bartonella, which is a co-infection of Lyme disease, they will be experiencing often incredible headaches, and they may not come every day, and so they're often cyclical in time with the way that the bacteria grows and dies off. So that's why I say, you never know what you're dealing with. So if you've got unexplained long-term pain of some kind, please take note. The other one is fatigue, so unexplained exhaustion, where even if you've had apparently a good night's sleep, you still feel exhausted. So no matter how much rest you get, you just feel exhausted. And it's very difficult to cope with at the best of times, especially while running a business. And then there's the brain fog. So the brain fog is often due to some neurotoxic level happening. So in a lot of those areas where there's infection, there's die-off. So what happens is that then the neurological pathways don't work as well as they could, and then people experience this terrible brain fog, which it almost feels like your brain's missing in action. You're indecisive, you're unable to make sort of creative decisions very well. So it does affect your business quite drastically. And then things like immune dysfunction. So if you think of the immune system, it's like your defender, your protector. And what you'd want is to have your immune system functioning so that it determines which are the baddies and which are the goodies. But the dysfunction comes where, like I mentioned with Hashimoto's, the immune system starts to attack the body itself. So it's out of its normal operating environment. So you have some type of ongoing infections. It could even be as simple with something like a mold toxicity. You could have ongoing sinusitis. So you thinking that it may be due to an allergy of some kind. But in fact, in Lyme disease, often mold toxicity is present. So there's this constellation effect of symptoms. And then the other one is, when you're unwell, even like when you're feeling flu-y or you've got a cold, you do start to feel a bit anxious or overwhelmed. So just imagine this long term, the overwhelm of knowing that your brain's not working, knowing that you can't do what you want to do, and the anxiety that comes with that. Like, for example, for myself, when I looked at things and I couldn't label common things in my kitchen, it created a lot of internal anxiety for me. And then sometimes you can tip over into a mood disorder like depression because it just feels overwhelming. You don't know where to turn for support and that sort of thing. So that was just a way to help you understand what chronic and an invisible chronic illness is like. So let's just expand it with the example of a cold or flu. So if you have cold or flu, you know that for a period of time while that virus works its way out, you're going to feel pretty grim. And you may experience some of these things. You may have joint pain with flu. You may feel fatigued. You may have brain fog. And obviously your immune system is working hard to get rid of the bacteria. And so you may experience that. But imagine if those symptoms never went away. And that is what invisible chronic illness is. It's like flu that never goes away. And it's really debilitating. So I hope that this has been helpful for you just to understand what it is, because we often in our Western world wait for a diagnosis. So if you recognize that you've got more than one of these symptoms, please start to take action. Don't wait for a diagnosis. And so if you'd like to, you know, pre-order my book, please go to hopeinadarktunnel.com and you can pre-order that through July. So bye for now, and let's live the fab life together.